Welcome in to the second half of the DNVR Madness Selection Sunday special. I'm Henry Chisholm. I'm here again with Ben Girding and Ryan Konigsberg. And since we've last talked, we've all had a chance to go and do some research. I talked to McKinley Wright and Deshaun Schwartz and Tad Boyle. These two watched a bunch of Georgetown tape. And now we're going to talk a little bit more about this bracket, make some picks, and it should be a lot of fun. How are you guys doing?
I'm doing great. I wasn't exactly sure what I was expecting from Georgetown, but to me, they kind of look like what their record says they are. But I can understand why they were underachieving in the first of the season, in how they were able to get it done late in the season, and obviously, they go on a 4-game run there. But this is a 9-win team before they win 4 in a row to clinch this spot. They absolutely had no chance of making the tournament if they didn't win all 4 of those games. And they are certainly a flawed team, but certainly a team that has the ability to, go and win the Big East tournament, as we can see. So I'm not sure what I was expecting, but they are absolutely beatable. And I think, the Buffs came in as a 5-point favorite at DraftKings Sportsbook to start things off. And I think that line is pretty correct. I personally, and I was talking to my friend Tyler Ziskin, who disagrees with me. I personally think that I personally think that Oregon State is better than Georgetown. And I definitely think that USC is better than Georgetown. And I see some similarities. Ben actually pointed out before the show some similarities between Colorado and Georgetown, and I think those are there too, and you can get into those in a second, Ben. I actually see some similarities between Georgetown and USC. I just think that Georgetown is a much worse version of that team.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a pretty fair comp, And look, I think it's easy to get caught up in the fact that Colorado just lost a tough game last night to a sort of a Cinderella team, and Georgetown has a lot of similar beats, but there is a reason they are the 12 seed and Colorado is the 5 seed. It's a combination of their total resume as well as how they're playing down the stretch. Colorado, before that tournament, loss on a 6-game winning streak. So this is a team that can get it done. I think the dynamic to watch is going to be between Georgetown's point guard Javon Blair and McKinley Wright. Both are kind of similar and again, we were only gone for about an hour and a half. But in the tape that I got to see, Blair is a kid that he likes his floaters. He puts up kind of some wilder shots, kind of entering into the paint, not necessarily at the rim, but attacking it. And you get a lot of similarities from McKinley Wright in that sense. Because he doesn't have the size of some of these bigger guards like a Cade Cunningham or even a Jalen Suggs, they really like to craft their attack from kind of 10 feet out and kind of hitting those floaters and whatnot. So I think that's interesting. Georgetown has a lot of size. They've got one guy, Qudus Wahab. He's a big man down low. And that is going to struggle. Excuse me. God, it's been a long day. That's going to cause the Buffs to struggle. But outside of those two players, you really feel great about Colorado's matchup against Georgetown. So while I think, maybe McKinley Wright and Evan Batty kind of cancel out those two guys, having people like Jariah Horn and Jabari Walker coming off your bench for Colorado, I think is what's going to be the edge that's going to lift the Buffs over the Hoyas.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like you said, we didn't have that much time here to watch them because when I watch what I saw from them in the tournament, which is when they were winning, and then I go back and look at their season stats, a lot of things don't really match up for me. For example, when I watched I watched 1.5. I've still got one on the screen over here, just watching out of the corner of my eye. I watched 1.5 of their games, and I thought, wow, this is not a very good 3-point shooting team. Well, then I go back and look. They've got 4 guys shooting 37% or better in terms of their actual rotation guys. So they can shoot the ball, apparently. I thought to myself, man, this team has really, really little offensive firepower, and I expected to go back and see a lot of games in the 60s. But then you look and, they scored 82 in the last regular season game of the year. They had a couple wins earlier, 81, 78, 86. I believe they even scored 90 in a game earlier in the season. So, it's weird because I expected things to be worse for them when they weren't winning, but they don't really match up. what I think really changed for them over this last weekend was their defense. They held Marquette to 49 points. They had Villanova to 71. They held Seton Hall to 58, and then they held Creighton to 48. Now, I can't give them that much credit for the Creighton win. Creighton was so bad in that game. Like, they should be embarrassed. I couldn't – like, after watching that game, I thought maybe Creighton should have been dropped a couple seed lines after how bad they looked in that game. So, yeah, and to be fair to them, Creighton was a 5 seed. So they just got done beating a 5 seed. Now they're going to play another one. But to me, it's going to come down to the Buffs making open shots. They will be there. They were there all night for Creighton. Creighton didn't make any of them. So it's going to be, okay, can Jeriah Horn do better than 0 of 5 from 3? I sure think he can. Can Deshaun Schwartz, who slowly but surely getting a little hot from outside, can he stay hot? Can Maddox Daniels knock down 1? That'll be a huge help. You go through the list. McKinley Wright, he really didn't shoot him last night, which was disappointing to me after he was so good from back there against USC. Can he knock down a couple? If you knock down some outside shots, I think you're going to win this game. Wahab is going to be a problem on the inside in terms of protecting the rim. And they have another 7-footer. He's got a hard name to say. But he's big. He's listed as bigger than I thought he was. But I think the fact that they have 2 7-footers means they're going to be able to take Evan Batty's scoring out of the game. Usually it's like you have a team that has 1 7-footer and they don't match up against Evan anyway. You can kind of pull them out on Dallas and Evan can go to work against a smaller guy. Well, they've got 2. So I think it's going to be tough for Evan Batty to score on the inside. And that, again, means you're going to have to get some more jump shots. So, yeah, it's a little bit uncomfortable going into a March Madness game and saying, look, it's going to come down to can you make jump shots, because everyone knows you go into a new arena, it gets a little sloppy. They don't always fall. But that, to me, is going to be the biggest thing for the Buffs. If they can make open jump shots, they will get open jump shots. If they can make them, they're going to win this game.
Ben, you have any thoughts about that?
I mean, it's pretty spot on. You're right. With the 2 7-footers that they have, this is not going to be an Evan Batty game. This is not going to be a Dallas Walton game. This probably also is not going to be a big Jabari Walker game from the inside. Last night, Walker, I believe, had 1 3 that rattled off the rim and the backboard and rolled around and ended up dropping. That's where Jabari Walker is going to be able to impact, is his perimeter shot, because he does have a nice stroke from the outside. But this is going to be a game that's pretty much 15 feet and back. It's going to be McKinley Wright's floaters, and then it's going to be Jeriah Horn and Deshaun Schwartz on the outside. And, that's pretty much all they can afford. I worry that this team, they're really built working the ball inside out. That's how they succeeded so often this year, is getting the ball early to Dallas Walton and Evan Batty. And it'll be interesting this game to see how that plan of attack is, because you're not going to get much luck. And I wouldn't be surprised if it really took 1 attempt to challenge, whether it be Wahab or their other 7-footer, where it's almost like Jabari Walker against USC, when he tried a little hook shot on Evan Mobley and it got swatted back down in his face. And then they realized, okay, he's actually a good 7-footer. So it'll be interesting to see how long that takes. But you're right. The shots just need to fall. They can't afford to be another slow start like they were against Oregon State. And if they can just, get back to their basics. And again, Jeriah Horn hit at a unbelievably low clip. Deshaun Schwartz didn't get enough attempts. So if they can start getting some of that to go, I agree. It should be a good matchup for Colorado.
And correct me if I'm wrong here, though, but I don't think a team that plays through their bigs has beaten the Buffs this year. At least not like that. The Buffs match up well against teams who play through their bigs. Evan Batty, he's not the most athletic guy in the world, but he's so strong that he really makes things difficult for guys down there. And Dallas Walton, well, his on-ball defense the last 2 games has been pretty disappointing for me. He's just big enough to get in your way and, make you not necessarily want to keep going. It just doesn't look like a good matchup for you. Evan Mobley gave him the work. He was going to give anyone the work that night, especially the way he was shooting the ball on long 2s. But for some reason, the Buffs do really well against teams that want to play through their bigs. And Georgetown, that's not exactly their game. Like, they're not just go down, set up, and get the ball to Wahab and then see what happens. But obviously, he's a big part of what they do. It's a Patrick Ewing coach team. You know, they're going to want to get their bigs involved, and he has a 7-footer that he's trying to groom down there. So they're going to try and get him involved. But I don't know that I really see a big lack of explosion from Georgetown on offense, which is why I think like if you're able to get hot a little bit from the outside, you might be able to open up a little bit of a lead here. And I trust the Buffs defense so much to, keep teams from getting back in the game if they're able to do that.
That's really good stuff. Here's a question. Who is Eli Parquet going to guard?
I probably Pickett would be my guess. But honestly, I don't know, because he actually is similar to Ethan Thompson in the sense that he's a lot bigger. He's 6'9", so actually scratch that. He looked more like 6'7" to me out there. But I don't know. There's also Bile, I believe his name is, or Bile. He's from Denver.
Chudalier Bile.
Yeah,
that's who I think it's going to be.
Yeah.
He was hot in that win against Creighton. And again, I completely agree. I think if you're Colorado watching Georgetown's tape on Creighton, I don't think you put a lot of stock in it because the Blue Jays were just that bad. But Chudalier Bile, he's 6'7", shooting 39%.
Chudalier Bile? There's no L in there.
Chudalier.
No L.
Chandelier.
Still an L sound.
Chandelier Bile.
Chudalier, I'm saying.
He's shooting 39% from three, 40% from the floor, getting you 10 points a game and 5 rebounds. I think that's a great Eli Parquet matchup because you match up the length. You can try and cut down on his perimeter shooting and try and just limit him to around that average. But I agree. I don't think there's anybody else because with Blair, you're probably putting McKinley Wright on him.
Well, you're putting McKinley Wright on Blair. They've got this freshman, Dante Harris. He's a 6-footer. So he's pretty small. It's weird. I'm thrown off by Tad Boyle's approach last night. And so I'm just curious to see what's going to happen. I think my best guess is he just didn't like the size matchup for Eli Parquet going up against Thompson. But Belay is 6'7". So, on the higher end, it's an interesting matchup for the Buffs size-wise just because they're bigger. And that's why I think the other big part of this game is going to be rebounding, which we know weirdly the numbers didn't say so, but kind of snake bit the Buffs last night. You don't want to give up a lot of second chance points to this team. So my answer to your question is I don't know. I confused Belay and Pickett there. I don't remember. Maybe it's just a blind spot for me in terms of his recruitment. I don't remember Belay at Denver South High School at all. He ended up going to JUCO and then ending up at Georgetown, but flew under my radar, that's for sure. So it's like I said, you might just end up seeing Deshaun Schwartz draw Belay and then Pickett. I don't know how they're going to match up with him because he's going to play the 4 for them to start, it looks like. Maybe you end up putting Jeriah Horn out there to start the game from a matchup standpoint. I don't know. Because, again, it's going to be a really tough one for Batty. It doesn't look like I don't know. It looks like they kind of switch up their starting lineups based on their matchups as well, whether they're going to start with the 2 7-footers out there or start with a little bit smaller matchup.
All right. That's really good stuff. We don't have any breaks to go to, so let's just keep moving. Let
us know what the boys said.
Yeah, exactly. I like I said earlier, was talking with we heard from Deshaun Schwartz, we heard from McKinley Wright, we heard from Tad Boyle. To be totally honest, not a whole lot of insight right there. I mean, I could tell you that they're all very, very excited to be heading back to the NCAA tournament. But in terms of takes about Georgetown, really not all that much. Tad said, he knows Patrick Ewing a little bit. They graduated high school the same year, 1981. Tad said he was a little better player than I was, had a little better career, which was pretty funny. But yeah, I mean, he basically said, neither of these teams know each other. I've literally never played in the history of these two programs. And so it really will be kind of a race over these next 6 days to scout each other and see what happens. Outside of that, yeah.
Have you heard the Patrick Ewing story during the Big East tournament this year?
I don't think so.
Apparently, he was just walking around Madison Square Gardens, like reminiscing, and he kept getting stopped by security because he didn't have the clearance. And so he apparently he was like, "Do you know who I am? This is my building, right?" I just thought that was funny that, people who work in Madison Square Garden right now have no idea who the Knicks, arguably their best player ever, maybe not even that big of an argument. They don't even know. And then you talk about, Deshaun Schwartz only knowing it because people have him on their, 2K team and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. And, that was kind of the other thing we talked about, is that relationship to Patrick Ewing with some of the younger guys, because Patrick Ewing has said, a lot of the guys that he recruits do not actually know all that much about him and his history at Georgetown. But Deshaun Schwartz said, my dad had a couple of Patrick Ewing jerseys growing up, so he knew that much about him and has since seen him play in 2K. And so that's that there. They talked a lot about their relationship with the tournament as well. Kin spoke about Trey Burke's run with Michigan. He also spoke about the Kemba Walker step back with UConn. I think Deshaun brought up Anthony Davis and his run at Kentucky, most outstanding player in the Final Four without hitting a field goal in the championship game. A lot of very sentimental stuff. And the crazy thing about that is that Patrick Ewing was actually the most outstanding player of the Final Four in 1984. And he scored 10 points of his team's 84 in that game. So a little similarity. Yeah, there's all the fluffy stuff that we talked about, but then there was a little bit about the game last night. Mostly that they're trying to move on. Tad called it kind of a grieving period, and they're going to take another day, another 2 days. I think right now they should be in the air headed to Indianapolis from Las Vegas. And yeah, they said, we thought we were a little bit tight, not necessarily because of nerves as much as they were just really excited to play in the game. They really wanted to win. Kin said, we weren't listening to music before the game because everybody was so fired up to go. And they did say, having gone through that, we now know that we need to be ourselves and go through our same pregame routines and just play our game. And it does seem like it was a bit of a learning experience for him.
Man, I kind of like hearing that. I kind of like hearing, I don't like hearing that they changed up their routine last night. But I like hearing that they learned their lesson from it. I get it. Waiting for an 8:30 start, I guess it was 7:30 their time last night, for something that's that exciting has got to be tough. And they were probably just so anxious to play. I was walking around my house cleaning stuff. I was like, wow, if the Buffs played in a really important late game every night, I'd be way more productive. But I was just trying to kill time, and I assume they felt the same way, just waiting for the game to start. But you could absolutely see they tightened up, and I think McKinley had a quote about that saying Tad wants to have a meeting about how we can avoid tightening up like that. That's exactly what happened to them. Dry Horn doesn't miss 5 threes unless he's a little bit tightened up. They don't miss 8 free throws unless they're a little bit tightened up. It's comforting to me that they kind of got that out of their systems already.
I think that's the right take. That's exactly what I thought when I heard it. Was, first of all, what were you thinking? But then after that, at least they've learned the lesson, and it's time to move on to the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, I can't imagine going through warm-ups and not listening to music, but you're right. That's the only, quite frankly, that's the only take to have at this point in the day is, at least they're learning from it, and they can sit here and say, we've learned our lesson. We're not going to switch things up like that. We're going to play our brand of basketball moving forward, because it kind of sucks to hear that. You're right. Why would you want to switch things up? Why would you get out of your groove? But hindsight is always 20/20. And right now we can just move forward and know that, okay, if that's their worst game and they got it out of their system, good, because Patrick Ewing's coming to town. And as someone says in the comments, it's not 1986, but this is still a team that's hot. So
It's a team that's hot, and I guess if you're looking at the negative side of this for the Buffs, because they definitely got, in my opinion, the worst 12 seed in terms of just overall resume and like just the type of basketball team they are. They also didn't. This isn't your traditional 5-12 game where you get a solid, major conference team going up against a good mid-major team. Like that's your class, the Winthrop game or the UCSB game. Those are the classic, very good mid-major team going up against a solid to good major conference team. And it's just not the Buffs. Maybe you could make the case that would have been a better draw for the Buffs, and just in terms of a matchup standpoint. I just don't know. I'm not sure. It's gonna. We'll know around the under 16. I think of the game on Saturday whether this was beneficial or not. But I do keep going back to the fact that I just don't think this Georgetown team is that explosive offensively, and I think you might see another really slow offensive start for the two teams. Maybe the Buffs get hot early. That would be huge. But I think it could be, let me go back to my notes here. I took some notes on that championship game against Creighton because it didn't get away until the end of the first half. But like they had 1 point through 4 minutes in that game. Georgetown did. They were down 13-6 at the 12-minute mark. And then again, it ended up being 13-13 with 9 minutes left. They had a bank 3 to go up 6 shortly thereafter, and then just kind of like turned the entire game, opened things up. Creighton started just chucking and missing everything, and they just ran away from it from there. If I didn't know the final score, I would have been sitting there saying, when does Creighton make their run? Because they just never did. They had at one point, I think it was 56-24. Just Creighton just never got going. They didn't make anything from that point on. So it's again not very exciting, not a very exciting offense from them. But they can get it from anyone, which I think makes them a little bit dangerous. Anyone in their starting 5 can put it in. There's not really a black hole or anything like that for them on offense. So we'll see. Like I said, if you got that traditional 12 matchup, you'd probably have an athleticism advantage. In this game, you have an athleticism disadvantage. You're going to have to beat them with skill.
Huh. I guess one more point that I want to make, if the game against Creighton in the championship was not all that impressive for Georgetown, and, they beat the Seton Hall to get there. Before that, they beat the 1 seed in the tournament, Villanova, but Villanova just completely fell apart without their starting point guard and best player. Maybe Georgetown's getting just a little bit too much hype, given that it wasn't the most challenging run to a Big East title.
Yeah, I'm in the middle of the Seton Hall game right now, so I can't really speak too much about how they played. Right now, where I had it, it's a 35-30 Georgetown with the first half almost wrapping up. So that was actually a pretty darn good game. But like you said, they got Villanova without their best player. They got Creighton's worst game of the season, I would venture to guess. And then they had, Marquette to start things, who's not an impressive team. And then this Seton Hall game. So, yeah, I think you're right. Look, as soon as I saw the matchup, I knew exactly what the national narrative was going to be, because you've got Georgetown led by Patrick Ewing, who plays in Washington, D.C. They're a team that everyone loves to love, for good reason. They're a lovable college basketball team for sure, but they are on the East Coast, and so I just knew the Big East, all of that. I knew that they were going to come out and all the national people were going to love them. I was kind of surprised to see the Buffs open as 5-point favorites. I wouldn't be surprised if that's already moved, and I wouldn't be surprised if it gets all the way down to probably 1 point by tip-off, because I think there's going to be so much national love for Georgetown. It's going to be everyone's, sexy 12/5 pick. And I love it because I think the Buffs can use that as fuel. If I was Tad Boyle, I'd have someone on my staff in charge of finding out every single national analyst who's picked Georgetown. In fact, Ben, you said it, and I've been looking out for it ever since you said it. I don't think a single one has picked the Buffs so far of any of your big college basketball shows that have been going on so far. So that's fuel for me, man. You're the 5 seed, and in the national eye, you're the underdog. So they should embrace that.
Absolutely. I was watching the ESPN show afterwards, and they were going through all of the upset watches, starting with the 7-10, and then they went to the 6-11 and the 5-12 and the 4-13 lines, and they were giving historical perspective on all that kind of stuff. So the 5-12 matchup, the 5 wins a lot more than I think you'd think, given how often everyone says, oh, you got to pick at least 2 12s to win. The one thing is that the last tournament that they had, obviously last year didn't happen. So the year before that, 3 12s won. And so right now that's kind of the steam. But whenever you pull up the 5-12 bracket, every single analyst says, oh, Georgetown's hot. No mention of Colorado, what they've done this year. They
don't know anything about Colorado.
Exactly. It is literally always just saying, oh, Georgetown's hot. That Colorado game scares me. That's the only time they mention Colorado's name is to bring up the game. So I agree. I think there's a lot of hype towards Georgetown, some rightfully earned. I mean, they did just win their conference tournament, 4 games in 4 days. But at the same time, you have your stars alma mater leading your team. The year after your historic coach, John Thompson Jr., passed, and, 49 years ago, yesterday, John Thompson Jr. was hired at Georgetown. 49 years later, the year he dies, they win the Big East tournament. It's a whole thing. It's the sexy pick to have the Hoyas going into the Sweet 16. But, Colorado is going to give them a good shot. And I agree. I think it's better. I think it's more comfortable to go into it right now because, quite frankly, it almost feels like you're playing with house money. As far as, well, nobody's picking us to win, so screw it. We can play loose because this isn't like the Pac-12 tournament where they opened up as 9-point favorites.
Exactly, yeah. The national narrative – well, first of all, all of these people who are talking on these shows watched the Big East tournament. Why? Because it has the word East in it. So they all saw Georgetown. They can talk about Georgetown. They know who Georgetown is. They know who Patrick Ewing is. I guarantee you 80% of these people have maybe watched one CU game all year. And so they don't know anything about CU the same way we didn't know anything about Georgetown when we got the draw. All we knew about Georgetown is they won the Big East tournament. That's how they're here. And so they're going to avoid talking about Colorado as much as they can until they have a little more information on the team, which, some of them might do the work to get that. A lot of them probably won't. It's just the way it is. It's just the way it is. And that's, again, I think it's a beneficial thing for the Buffs to hear everyone say, I've got Georgetown. And like I said, just print out the clippings. You got 6 days. I cannot believe they don't play until Saturday. You got 6 days to motivate this team, to prepare them for this team. And I really think that Tad Boyle is the better coach here. And I think that he's going to have this team ready with a really great game plan for how to stop them.
Yeah, that's where I'm at too. We've got plenty more on the way. Send in all of your questions, though, because we want to hear all those. We're going to be talking about some other parts of the bracket that don't include Colorado. Maybe get into some of our favorite upset picks if we don't like the Georgetown over Colorado pick, which none of us do. But yeah, get those questions in. And a reminder that we will be back doing this before the show on, before the games on Friday and Saturday, and then during the games on Friday and Saturday all day. You can hang out with us as we watch them on the Big Bets Bonanza.
Definitely on Friday.
Definitely on Friday. Yes. That's going to be we don't know for sure on Saturday. But yeah, definitely on Friday, and it's going to be a lot of fun. Stay tuned for that. Make sure that you fill out a bracket if you're a DNVR member and join the DNVR Bracket Challenge because there's awesome prizes and it's free to enter. So why wouldn't you? Yeah. Oh, also, if none of the questions are, what is a Hoya? I am going to be really upset, and I'm not sure what I'm going to threaten to do, but we'll come back to that. Can't think of anything off the top of my mind. Somebody please ask me what a Hoya is because I spent too much time on that to not get asked.
Well, if no one else does, I'll ask because I don't know yet.
Thank you, Ryan.
Hey, Henry, what's a Hoya?
No, I'm so glad you asked, Ryan. A Hoya. Wow, where to even begin? So back in the 1800s at Georgetown, there was this thing that the students like to do where they just chant Hoya Saxa. And I guess like in the way that all of us would like go to the dorm rooms and like drink or play video games or whatever, they would just do this Latin chant Hoya Saxa, which is a weird thing. And when you translate that, it means what rocks. What rocks. So what they decided was, because it was taking off and everybody was just like chanting Hoya Saxa, they would change the name of the mascot to the Hoya, which means, take your pick, Ben. Does that mean what or rocks?
He's muted.
He's muted.
It rocks.
No, it means what, which is basically like nonsense. They're the Georgetown Whats. And from there, like a bunch of crazy things happened. You know, they like brought a bunch of dogs to football games. They're mostly some sort of terrier. A couple like Great Danes got in there, I guess. But eventually, like they brought the football team back, decided they wanted like a real live mascot. The students got together. They bought a bulldog and decided to name it Hoya the Bulldog. But the problem was that it would only respond to the name Jack. And so it just had to be called Jack the Bulldog. And ever since, the name of their mascot has been Jack the Bulldog, both the like guy in the costume and just the little tiny bulldog.
I hate when they do that.
Yeah, I know, me too. I hate a lot of things about this. I also hate that the school's called Georgetown, because that's not, it's called Washington, you know?
Well, but Georgetown is a different part.
Wait. No.
Yeah.
Like it's not. It's different. Like I thought that was just like their clever little like Georgetown is what we call Washington because we know his name is George. Like Missoula, they call it the zoo.
Wait, what, Henry?
No,
Georgetown.
no.
What is Georgetown?
Georgetown is a town in Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. is like a state, but not a state. And so Georgetown is like a little city town in Washington, D.C.
Okay, well,
there's a full area in D.C. called Georgetown, and there's stores, there's shops, there's
It's
houses.
a nice place.
You get asked where you live, you say Georgetown, everyone knows that. And then there's also the university.
I got to admit, though, if you walked through Georgetown right now, you would not come away thinking there must be a good college basketball team that plays here.
I disagree.
No. Oh, really?
I mean, I think that is...
Especially with Maryland right down this, like, a few, like, 30 minutes away. Like, Maryland, do you think of that? I don't know.
No, I think Georgetown
is a bougie area.
I mean, just think of all that as kind of gross.
It's the perfect Big East school. It's a school that, you know, because Big East only has basketball. And so it's like, okay, it's straight rural. There's obviously no room for a big stadium. But, you know, teams like everybody in the Big East just kind of feels like that to me.
Yeah, but it's so, like that area is just super bougie.
Yeah, that's fair.
Weird.
Yeah, right? Exactly. Henry's getting dunked on by his mom in the comments.
Wow, that's fun. It's all on Wikipedia. My goodness.
Yeah, everyone knows that Wikipedia is the most trustworthy source.
Absolutely. Everybody just kept saying Hoya Saxa.
Ryan and I were watching Georgetown tape, and Henry, while the media is on the background, is looking up why is Georgetown called Georgetown, and came to the conclusion that it was because it was a new way to refer to George Washington.
Well, I mean, what else could it possibly be? It's in Washington, D.C. Washington, Washington, Georgetown.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. Like, you were thinking, like, Boston, Beantown. Washington, Georgetown.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Yeah. I like your process of thought there. It was just that you didn't realize it was a real place. That was the problem. I feel like, yeah. I don't know. I still think that's dumb. But what about some upsets though? Ben, you said that you were watching the ESPN stuff. What have you decided on? What's your big pick?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few. And so I'll pull up, I've filled out my version 1.0 of my own bracket in our DNVR bracket challenge. I don't know, probably a lot. But
I'm a 3 bracket kind of guy.
Yeah, see, I've got 2 so far. One is going to be for our bracket challenge. One is called SCO MF Buffs, and then the other one I haven't decided what the theme of that one's going to be just yet. But some upsets that I have, obviously Colorado over Florida State. I have Colorado making it all the way to the Sweet 16 in this. Some first-round upsets. I have the winner of MSU, UCLA over BYU. BYU is a very good basketball team, but I think whoever wins that play-in game is just going to keep rolling. UCLA, they had that tough loss against Oregon State, but they're still a very talented team. I think they are far more talented than the 11 seed. And Michigan State right now is hot as hell. I would probably pick the Spartans to still win just because of where Tom Izzo has that program. So I really think they're going to keep rolling and upset in that regard. Some other ones that I have, Winthrop over Villanova. I know we talked about that a couple times. I am back and forth on Utah, Texas Tech. I think I probably just need to hang out with RK one more time, and then he'll convince me that Utah State is probably making it to the Sweet 16. Another one from Virginia Tech over Florida. That's a 10-7 game. That one, I feel better about Virginia Tech than Florida. And then I've got Oregon State upsetting Tennessee. Tennessee's offense they just aren't very good. I think Oregon State is going to be able to free up some shooters on the outside with Jared Lucas and Ethan Thompson.
Man, maybe. I'm so torn on Tennessee because after I watched the Buffs play Tennessee, I was like, this team is the best defensive team in the country. And then they just stopped and they fell off big time and just started losing. So I don't know. It'll be interesting. They were a top 5 team at that point, I think, right? And they never really sniffed that afterwards. So they're interesting. I worry about their defensive prowess when it comes to Oregon State. I really like BYU. So I disagree with that take. Although I do think UCLA is way better. I mean, think about this. 2 weeks ago, you can correct me if I'm wrong. They were, on their way to potentially winning the Pac-12 title. And the wheels kind of come off a little bit, but they also just get beat by some good teams. And all of a sudden they go from 4-5 line all the way down to 11. But the skill level on that team is certainly up to a 4-5 type of team. So I like them a lot. I wish they weren't going up against BYU because BYU is they're built for March, in my opinion.
Yeah. And, while we're kind of talking about it, I know there is one question in the comments too, which is this region coming in from Quentin Walker. Our graphics team, they put together, some DNVR branded for each region. Let's walk through them, and kind of go through, find out really what is the toughest region, because I think right now Colorado is in a great spot. But I'm interested to hear what you guys have to say as well. So let's kind of take it from the top. Ali, if you don't mind, can we pull up the one with Gonzaga in it? I believe that's the Western region first.
Is it?
Yes, it's the West.
Okay.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, you look through, obviously, the Gonzaga is the 1 seed. That's the number 1 team in the country. Number 2, Iowa could have been a number 1 seed if things had broken just a little bit differently this season. But Ben, what do you see here?
Yeah, no, I mean, Iowa was probably one more win. Well, actually, I think they probably would have had to win the Big Ten tournament to earn that 1 seed back, but they're very good. Gonzaga, I think, has the easiest path to the Elite 8, but after that point, when they have to play Iowa, it's going to be tough. Gonzaga, they're going to beat that 16 line. The 8-9 game with Oklahoma and Missouri here, those are 2 teams that I think that's going to shape up to be a fun matchup, but neither of them I really think are going to be good enough to overtake Gonzaga. And then you look at, Creighton, UC Santa Barbara, Virginia, Ohio. Again, 4 teams, none of them really scare me. The last I believe it was the last 13 seed specifically to make the Sweet 16 was 7 years ago, I believe, one give or take, but it was Iowa. They were, all over the place. It was Ohio. So the Bobcats were the last 13 seed to actually make the Sweet 16. They have a decent path here because Virginia, we still don't know what's going on in that program. It came out after the bracket was announced that Virginia will not be arriving in Indianapolis until Friday, and they cannot start practicing again until Thursday at the earliest. So this is going to be a team who they can only do mental reps until Thursday. Plus, we really don't even know what their contact tracing is going to look like. So if you're looking for a deep sleeper upset, that, might not catch the eye of a casual viewer who doesn't know what's going on with Virginia, Ohio could be a sneaky pick. But for that top of the bracket, I do think Gonzaga is going to skate to the Elite Eight. Under that, I think USC has a really good shot to make it to the Sweet 16 for kind of the same reason. Kansas is in COVID protocols as well. We don't know what's going to be left of that team. USC, they've got the size to beat up on Wichita State and Drake. And for Kansas, we do know that their big man, McCormick, is out with COVID. Whether or not he'll be ready to go for the tournament start is still in question. So USC has a nice shot there.
They've got to have like 2 more 7-footers just waiting in the wings, though.
Probably. And then Iowa probably is going to skate by. The really interesting matchup here on this bottom half of the Western region still to me is Oregon VCU. Oregon, I think, is going to be a heavy favorite because they've got the brand recognition and some of the big names. But VCU's been playing fantastic basketball all year long.
Interesting. Man, I don't know. I think this is a really. I could see both Pac-12 teams making the Sweet 16 in this bracket here, but at the same time, Iowa is pretty nasty. I'm just trying to figure out where Gonzaga's going down. I don't think they're going to win the national championship, so I'm just trying to figure out what the spot is. I don't know if it's against Iowa in the Elite Eight. I'm having a hard time seeing it, honestly, because I was ready to say, like, oh, they're not going to make the Sweet 16. And then I looked at the draw, and I'm like, no, they are. But I think that top half of this region is pretty soft, whereas I think the bottom half of this region is a bit of a gauntlet.
Completely.
Eastern Washington is tough, too. I mean, it's a Big Sky team. It's a 14 seed, and that's the right place for them to be. But they've gotten hot. I mean, you guys were watching me watch the score just a couple of nights ago when they were up 40-something to 11 on my Grizzlies. So, I don't know. I'm not going to pick against Kansas, but I'm going to be really tempted.
I will say, and this is just going to tease up while we get into the other regions as well. If you're filling out your bracket and you're looking for tips and tricks, probably should not have more than, definitely should not have more than 2 1 seeds in the Final Four. And the 1 seeds have only matched up in the national championship game a handful of times. So, while you're going through these matchups, you're like, wow, Gonzaga really could skate to the Final Four. And you could say the same for Baylor and potentially Illinois. You just got to try and, when you're filling out these brackets, try and go with your gut and see really where could we mix things up? Where might we see some upsets? And Ryan, I love what you pointed out about the Pac-12 might being able to get to the Sweet 16. Iowa is an explosive team, and their defense has really improved in just the month of February. But they really improved because they started out in like the hundreds and adjusted defensive efficiency. So while they're getting better on the defensive end of the ball, that's still an offensive dominant team. Oregon, if they get out of VCU and they show that they're overcoming the loss to the Beavers in the conference tournament, would not be shocked in the slightest to see them upset Iowa just because Oregon's defense will give Iowa's guards some trouble.
Yeah. All right, let's go to the next one.
Yep.
Yes, so next up should be the Southern region on the right side, top right-hand corner of the bracket.
Yeah, there it is. Number 1, Baylor. I think consensus number 2 team in the country. The 2 seed is Ohio State, who we've talked before is one of the weaker 2 seeds. Again, Ben, I'll throw it to you. What do you see here?
Yeah. Hartford, after going through the whole bracket, if you are trying to pick a 16 over a 1, I do think it's Hartford. That, to me, is less because I'm on the Baylor's bad train, but more so because I think Hartford is the best 16 seed here. Some other names to watch. Again, we talked about.
I'm so mad that you said that before I got to say it because I'm feeling the Hartford vibes.
Somebody is going to win the DNVR bracket challenge, and it's because they have Hartford going to the Sweet 16, and it's going to happen. That's going to be my bold prediction. But we talked about Winthrop Villanova. That is a potential upset. Winthrop, they're 23-1, but they don't have any quadrant 1 games. Not wins, not losses, games. So while their record is very impressive, this is still a team that hasn't exactly been battle tested yet. Some other ones in here, Texas Tech, Utah State. That's going to be a fun matchup. Mac McClung is a scoring fiend at Texas Tech, but Utah State's got their big man. That's interesting. Another one
Does
here,
he
Florida.
Score at the rim? Is he? Where does he like to score?
Utah State's guy?
No, McClung.
McClung. No, everywhere. He is a. I'm trying to think of like a decent comp to a pro player. He is honestly he reminds you of who Texas Tech had in their run. I guess that was only 2 years ago, but he's a point guard. He works all over the place. He's got a nice stroke on the outside, but he's kind of scrappy driving to the rim, can finish well. But I think the question you're going for, is he going to be stopped by Utah State center? No. They're kind of just separate ends of the floor in a sense. So it's not exactly a one-for-one trade-off there for Texas Tech.
I was going to say, if he's a guy who likes to get to the rim, he was in for a terrible awakening.
Yeah. One other one on here that I think is interesting upset-wise as far as the first round is going to be Virginia Tech over Florida. Florida, they're just – I don't think they're a 7 seed. And Virginia Tech has been very spotty all year. The ACC is not what it normally is, but the Hokies are still here to play. Quentin Walker coming in here with Alex Caruso comp to Mac McClung. I don't hate it. I don't hate it at all. I'm pretty sure Mac still has – some hair. So he's definitely got the swag factor, which is better than Alex Caruso, in my opinion. But yeah, that's a decent comp. But that's kind of where I'm at with the Southern region.
I don't like this region. I think this region sucks.
I kind of agree.
Yeah.
Wisconsin, North Carolina is like an 8-9 game. Both of those just feel kind of gross to me. And I feel like that's kind of the vibe all the way through. Like there aren't a lot of teams who I really want to pick.
That's what I mean. I'm like, okay, I don't want to pick Winthrop because everyone's picking Winthrop. And then I'm like, I don't want to pick Villanova because they suck now. I'm like, Baylor are fraudulent in my opinion. Ohio State is the worst 2 seed. Arkansas isn't exciting. Like
it's Arkansas.
It's Arkansas. Here's why. Their head coach, Eric Musselman, this dude, I don't know if you saw, but this man, after one of their wins, took off his shirt and sprinted into their locker room. And Arkansas is just like a funny team. And that's why I'm going to have
Arkansas is supposed to do.
Exactly. Yeah. That is the most Arkansas thing I've heard.
So, I think they're the most fun team in this. But I agree. This region does not really excite you. I think this is a region where most people are going to actually stick pretty close to the vest and have Baylor representing the Southern region because – it's just nothing really gets you excited. Whereas, in the region we just looked at, you could reasonably make a case for USC, Iowa, even Virginia maybe to make a run just because of, for Virginia, that team's history. They're still the reigning champs, whether it be Iowa or USC, they've got the talent. Whereas here, not a whole lot of people can really challenge. If it's Ohio State and Baylor in the Elite Eight, I don't see a scenario where Ohio State keeps it within double digits by the final score, just because Ohio State is so undersized and Baylor is huge.
Yeah, Baylor is by far the best team in this bracket, and I still just don't trust them at all. This to me has Cinderella written all over it, this region, and I just don't know who it is, but it might be Utah State.
I was going to say call your shot, so is it Utah State if you're calling it right now?
Oh, God, I kind of like Winthrop, but I don't want to pick them because everyone's going to.
Can I ask, have you seen any Utah State games except the one where they beat Colorado State?
I've seen them beat Colorado State twice.
Okay. That's enough then. That's enough of a sample.
Dude, they've got the best rim protector in the country.
That's what several people are saying.
Several people are back.
I don't know who it's going to be. North Texas is kind of sexy.
Yep. That's
someone is going to the Elite Eight in this bracket that we don't know who they are yet. I will figure it out by the time I fill out my bracket.
I hope you let me know when you do.
What?
Said Henry, do you have any dark horses? I want to hear your shot for this one too.
I mean, I just have such a tough time taking Utah State. And I know that it comes from like it's a Mountain West school,
yes,
and there is that bias against them where I just like Are you really going to make a run? And then I say, okay, well, if it's not Utah State, then is it North Texas? And I'm really going to say, like, that's who you bank on, the team that's playing number 4 Purdue in the first round. Utah State really isn't a bad pick. I'm not going Winthrop because everybody's going to go Winthrop. I'm not going Hartford because that'd be dumb. You know what? Give me North Texas. I'll take North Texas.
Go.
Here is if you're looking for a dark horse, North Carolina, I do think they could make it past Baylor. I really do. I think they're playing great basketball. And Ryan, I think you said it on, I don't know if it was earlier in this podcast or the selection show officially live one that we did, but you pick based on coaches when it's tough.
Yep.
And Roy Williams is one of the best coaches in college basketball. So if his team is rolling right now, wouldn't hurt to go ahead and pick him.
Coaches are always the tiebreaker here.
Yeah. Shall we move on to let's do the Midwest first. Let's save Colorado for last. So let's do the Midwest, highlighted by, oh, crap, sorry, Allie.
We're good.
Highlighted by Illinois as the 1 seed. This bracket, or this region, to me, I have Illinois going to my Final Four in my version 1.0, but Oklahoma State is right there. I think Oklahoma State, and the problem with the Cowboys I think they are probably going to be the most picked team to the Final Four that's not a 1 or a 2 seed, just because everybody is going to recognize Cade Cunningham, and they're playing well, and they're a fun team to root for. And Cade Cunningham, he's got swag. It'd be a fun team to root for. Where are you guys at here?
Oh, gosh. So to me, there's always 2 paths with the lottery pick teams, and I'm talking about, the teams that have one really, really great player. It's either a player that's hot and carry them really far, or in their very first game, he doesn't have it and they go down. Or in one of their early games, I never like riding the teams that are so reliant on one player because it's just so easy for a guy to have an off night. And that's kind of the reason why Oklahoma State is a 4 seed here, because to me, when Cade Cunningham doesn't carry them, they don't really know what else to do. So I won't be putting them in my Elite 8 here. It's funny because I really wanted to pick Oregon State depending on who they went up against, but I think Tennessee is going to give them fits defensively. So they're an interesting one. But the team that I love in this region is West Virginia, aka Press Virginia. They can they can make you go so out of sorts. Like Morehead State, they're going to have 6-7 days to prepare for this game. They'll be ready for it. But when the winner of San Diego State and Syracuse goes up against this team, they're just going to be flustered. And it's so hard to win when you're flustered in March. So I'm going to have them in my Elite 8. We'll see what I end up doing from there. Illinois is, to me, really scary. They are just so well built. They are so well built that I might end up having them go all the way.
I did in my version 1.0, for what it's worth. I had Illinois going all the way, and I did have West Virginia in the Elite 8 as well, because I agree. Bobby Huggins, man, that West Virginia team, they are just big. They're physical. They are not afraid to kind of hit you in the mouth on defense a little bit, and I think that's going to be huge. But when West Virginia goes up against Illinois, I don't think it's going to be enough, because Illinois right now has the best 1-2 punch in the country. They've got Ayo Dosunmu, who's probably the best guard behind maybe Cade Cunningham. There's a big argument there for either of those players. And then they've got who I think is the best big man in the game in Kofi Coburn. When you've got 2 guys who are arguably the best at their positions, on the same team in college basketball, a lot of times that's going to be enough to propel you far.
Yeah. I think Illinois is a good pick. You've said it already, RK, but I just hate so much that Tennessee and Oregon State are playing each other in the first round. Like, after looking at the last region where I just can't find teams that I want to pick, I would love to pick both of these 2 teams and Oklahoma State. And the fact that the winner's playing Oklahoma State is just brutal. I'm not sure what I'm going to do there, but I do know that I'm going to take one of those 3 teams to play Illinois, and I'm not sure whether they're going to beat Illinois or not. And it's probably not going to be Oregon State. From there, I think San Diego State, Syracuse. I'm feeling good about San Diego State in that one. I'm feeling good about West Virginia in the game that will be the winners will play each other. And so I'm not really sure again, West Virginia or San Diego State, but I do feel like those two go chalk. Those are my big takes when I see this.
Yeah, I've got a couple up just coming from this region. One to watch for me is going to be Syracuse, and that's because, again, I'm banking on that coaching thing with Jim Boeheim. Look, I know San Diego State's a great team, but Syracuse is actually playing pretty good basketball right now, and I think they're going to have that competitive edge from a coaching standpoint. And then for me, another one is going to be the 7-10 matchup. I think Rutgers is the better team than Clemson. This is a Rutgers team a lot of people forget because they haven't been as good lately. But in December and early January, Rutgers was going toe-to-toe with the Big Ten's best, beating Ohio State, playing very well against teams like Iowa and, Minnesota when Minnesota was good. Rutgers is a talented team. I think Clemson is overrated. I think Rutgers should probably move on. So this is another 10-7 matchup to keep an eye on.
Yeah, and Houston scares me as a 2 seed. They are electric, but they're also like Houston. I don't know how to say it other than that. Like, I just think they're gonna have trouble when they just run into, even like if they run into West Virginia, I think they're in big trouble.
Yeah, I don't think Houston's getting out of the West Virginia matchup just because, like you said, they're playing great basketball right now. And I apologize if there's anybody who watching today that's a fan of the American Conference, but the talent gap between the Big 12 and the American is significant enough to nod towards Bobby Huggins in this one.
Yeah. Yeah,
all
and
right.
Kirk here in the comments says, amazing Buffs and Tennessee both got 5 seeds. They humbled us earlier in the season head-to-head. Yeah, that was a really important game for the Buffs, I think.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of just let them know what the standard was going to be. And maybe the opposite effect happened for Tennessee, where they got a little high on their own supply or drunk on their own wine, as Tad Boyle would say. And, just, I don't know, lost their mojo after that, lost their killer instinct because – they I thought that it would be impossible for the average college team to score on them after I watched that game. And then, you go look at some of the scores after that game. They were not clamping like that against other teams. But again, that goes back to my biggest worry with Colorado, and that's simply their lack of upper tier athleticism. That's what all these teams have. And unfortunately, it's one of the things that Georgetown has. That's probably the one thing that Georgetown has that really scares me is they have upper tier athleticism. It's just not how the Buffs win. The Buffs, in a roundabout way, are built more like these, mid-major schools that are really good in terms of just they bring in really skilled players and are able to, win off of good coaching and a lot of great effort. The Buffs, I will say, compared to those mid-major teams, are better athletes. And just more well-rounded basketball players. Like the Buffs can do it in a lot of different ways. It's not just we're going to try and rain threes on you, and if we do, you're in trouble. They can do it in a lot more ways than that. But, when you go up against a team like West Virginia, you go up against a team like Tennessee, you go up against these guys, like they are skilled, and then they're just freakish athletically. It's the one part that I think the Buffs don't have when it comes to, the formula to make a long, long run.
Yeah, that's really spot on.
Yeah, I agree. Let's move on to the final region and see what Colorado's up against. 1 seed is Michigan, a pretty good draw. I'm a big fan of Alabama, but as a 2 seed, you could do worse. Ben, what do you think?
Yeah, this was, if Colorado was going to be the 5 seed, and we talked about it for probably 2 weeks, talking about, do you want to be the 5 or the 6? Because 5 is going to have the 1 seed, 6 is going to have the 2. This is probably the best situation for Colorado to actually get to the Elite 8. Look, Colorado, Georgetown, we talked about it in the intro. We don't have to talk about that much more. Florida State, UNC Greensboro, this is a game that I could see I could see Florida State losing in the first round. I really could. Florida State, I don't think is that great. I think everybody coming out of the ACC right now is, I don't even want to say overrated because I don't think they have any teams higher than a 4, but they're just not a normal conference. They don't have Duke and North Carolina running the table like normal. So for Florida State to be a 4 seed kind of has an asterisk to it for me because their resume just isn't as strong. Colorado, I think, will make it to the Sweet 16 out of this for my initial reaction. And then most likely you're playing Michigan. Michigan, they were really, really good and still are. But up until mid-February, they started to show some flaws. They can be beat. They are not like Gonzaga where they're undefeated, or they're also not like Illinois where Illinois has some losses, but they're
peaking.
Yeah, exactly. So you feel great about where they're hitting them for Michigan. Looking at the bottom side of this bracket, were Colorado to make a run to the Final Four, we talked a little bit about that BYU play-in game against, Michigan State or UCLA doesn't, depending on who that is. Other than that, UConn, Maryland, I think a lot of people are going to pick Maryland. I would tend to err on the side of UConn, but the bottom half of this bracket to me, I do think is going to end up being straightforward. Outside of that, I think Alabama will cruise into the Elite Eight. Maybe cruise is the wrong word for it since it is March Madness, but I think that's probably how that's going to shake out.
Yeah, I agree with you on just about everything you said there. Michigan, man, I feel like they lost their mojo a little bit. And Illinois kind of snatched their soul when they played late there in the regular season. They are very good, though. And if you're the Buffs, you are hoping that one of LSU or St. Bonaventure pulls off the miracle because you don't, that's just an incredibly tough matchup. But they're flawed. They're, as far as 1 seeds go, to me, they're the most flawed outside of Baylor. So I guess the second most out of 4. But I think that this really shook out well for the Buffs if they can get past Georgetown. And it's weird. It's just weird how this works in March Madness. Is you got to get that first one. You just got to get through. It's kind of like what I was saying about the Cal game the other night. You never know how you're going to react. You never know what that feeling in your stomach is going to be like when you walk out onto that floor for the first time. It's just a tough place to be. You're going to be in a dogfight with Georgetown, I have a feeling. You're just going to have to make a big shot late to get you through. And then all of a sudden, for the rest of the tournament, you feel like you're playing with house money. You have you have the monkey off your back. And for me, like you said, Florida State, flawed team. UNC Greensboro could knock them off. There's just a great path here for the Buffs to do something special.
And before we get out of here, we do have just a couple more questions to get to. Brian Rothrock asked, doesn't Florida State have a 6'6" point guard that can give Ken a lot of trouble? Ben, go ahead.
But I mean, the thing with Florida State is I think you need to take that with a grain of salt because, quite frankly, anybody you're getting on the round of 64 most likely is going to have one guy that's going to give you trouble. Whether it's a point guard giving Ken trouble or a 7-footer giving Evan Batty and Dallas Walton trouble. I think you're going to run into those situations outside of the first round anyway. So it is kind of just like a pick your poison. I think that the beauty of McKinley Wright is even against bigger defenders, the one thing no one can anticipate is McKinley Wright's first step. He is so twitchy, whether it's on ball or off ball. And I think that's where he has that advantage is, he's not going to be shooting over guys that are 6'6". This isn't Michael Porter Jr., who you can kick it to him in the corner and he'll shoot a 3 contested or not because no one can reach his launch point. With Ken, he's never trying to shoot over people anyway. It's a lot of pick and roll action to try and get him into the lane to shoot some floaters or try and draw contact at the rim. So that's a great point that there is going to be a little bit of a size mismatch from the guard perspective. But Ken has been playing so long that he's used to that at this point. I mean, he faces guys like Duarte in Oregon, and all those different guys in the Pac-12 where I think he should be prepared. But that is a great point, Brian, to bring up.
Yep. And
I like the point I was just going to say, I like the point that you made that just you're going to run into someone that you don't like that matchup. Everywhere you go, you're going to have something that you say, man, that's going to present problems. How do we fix it? That's why we always lean on the coaches, because it's up to the coaches to figure that out. Sorry, Henry.
Exactly. But, if he's 6'6", then maybe the rest of the lineup is even taller, but maybe the shooting guard is 6'3". I haven't looked. And if that's the case, then Kin can defend him. You've neutralized it at least a little bit on the other end. You can mess with the matchups on the offensive end. There's ways to work around it. Let's see. Any other questions in here? Looks like we've gotten through. Yeah. We can go back to what are your sources, Henry? Thanks, Allie, for that. Fly by Cygnus asks, Big East? I thought you said Big West. But that's not really a question for us. It was a good joke. Yeah. I guess we never really talked about, with 6 days to prepare, who do you take, Tad or Ewing? And we will end on this question.
Tad.
Yep. It's definitely Tad. I mean, he's been doing it longer. He's been here before. Patrick Ewing is a great player. He's yet to prove that he's a great coach. And I absolutely think that Tad Boyle is a great coach.
Yep, absolutely.
Agreed. That's going to do it for today. A reminder, get into this DNVR Madness bracket pool. It's going to be a lot of fun, a lot of great prizes. You do have to be a DNVR member, but there's a bunch of other perks that come along with that, so you should do that anyway. On top of that, we'll be having some awesome coverage over the course of this tournament, starting Friday morning when we preview the day's games. So that's going to be a lot of fun. Okay. Thanks, Mom. I'm sorry about the mix of Latin and Greek. That's the end of the show. We will see you guys soon.